So I'd like to introduce Mr. Toby Miller, who, like your Dr. Ruth, boy, he's dynamite on being an advocate for, certainly to me, but to many others. So I'd like to introduce Toby Miller on advocacy and other issues.
Thank you. I smile extra wide because I am a professional mama's boy. And that's my mom.
All right.
So she is probably the reason why I took this on in terms of being able to speak about advocacy. And Pastor G, you set it up perfectly. I want to kind of circle back about a few things in the space of what you said, Doc. One of the slides, and I don't have a slide deck, I am your slide deck. One of the slides that the doctor put up showed the impact or where maternal mortality is among different groups. Who had the lowest maternal mortality? Just want to see if you ever paid attention to this. Latinos, right? All right. Arguably, they have just as many barriers in life that Black folks do. Mm-hmm. So why would theirs be lower? Theirs is the lowest infant mortality. This has been a question for the past 30 years. Mm-hmm. Why have they had historically low infant and maternal mortality? Mm-hmm. Theirs is jumping up, but it's still below white folks. Mm-hmm. And I'm one who doesn't compare myself to where white folks are. I don't believe parity makes a whole lot of sense to us. Mm-hmm. If we were dying at the same rate as white folks, would we be satisfied as a people? I wouldn't say no. All right, so when I look at theirs, I also kind of looked at, and this has been a conversation the past 30 years, Doc. Mm-hmm. Why is theirs so low? And yet they, on the surface, have just as many barriers to prenatal care as we do, just as many socioeconomic barriers as we may, right? They have a whole bunch of other challenges. But one of the things, and Bishop will kind of amen on this, one of the things that Latino community has is a social contract that aligns with promoting La Familia. Mm-hmm. So when a baby is on the way, the entire community sees that baby as an asset. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter necessarily who the father is. Everybody is involved in promoting, cultivating, ensuring, supporting that whole family. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that is one of the intangible but probably real tangible reasons why that maternal mortality rate is as low as it has been historically. And we are tracking all kinds of indicators. Well, Black women don't have access to prenatal care. Got it? That's probably true, but Latino women don't either. Right. But their maternal mortality rate is lower. So there's a social determinant element that I believe exists that speaks to a larger concept of advocacy that I'm going to bring forward. So when a child is on the way, our community, no matter who and where or what, needs to look at that as an asset, mm-hmm. a future king and queen within our community. And if we orient our lives around that, we'll look at a pregnant woman and the pregnant father, wherever that is, as a unit. It's the me, we. I'm going Muhammad Ali. My favorite poem that I've ever heard is me, we. I am because you are because I am, we are because we are. That whole concept, I believe, adjusts the social contract so that when we as a people start seeing babies come forth, we as a people are in an advocacy role by virtue of our new social contract with each other. Mm-hmm. That when I see a pregnant woman, my question isn't, where's the father? Mm-hmm. Because that puts things in that ear that I heard Pastor G was talking about. Who is in that ear? Our community needs to be in a whole different orientation around what it means to advocate for our own. It's not that racism is not important. It's there. Got it. It's not that there are all kinds of systemic barriers that exist. Got it. But if we're really going to change some of the nature of these things and the outcomes that we're seeing in our own community, we have to be about a different level of advocacy. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I was invited to talk about that. I also believe I'm falling right in your segue, Pastor. When we talk about it's important that it's not just the father, but it's the man in the community. And the invitation was to be that man. Mm-hmm. The question is, a lot of brothers are sitting there, what is a man? I've never seen one. I submit if we create a whole concept around what manhood truly is, we recognize manhood can be broken down in terms of a real quick acronym. Meaningful, active, necessary. Mm. Can you be that man? It could be the question we can ask everybody in our community. Are you going to be meaningful in the life of these children and these families that are out there, whether they're yours or somebody else's? Are you going to be active? Not just passive, sitting on the sideline. Are you going to be actively engaged? Mm. And you're going to be necessary. Not, well, she's pregnant, it's on her. Mm. I had nothing to do with that. So you're going to become a man. I would invite that be an extra component to this concept of advocacy. So forgive me for being both macro and micro with the concept that I'm talking about. I'm your presentation. I'm your click. What I'm going to bring forward to you is one of the charges what a man would bring to this whole conversation as an advocate, whether I'm the parent or not. I have 3 biological children. All 3 of my children were brought into the world by cesarean section. I have 2 other children that one I've kind of adopted, one I claimed, and then I have thousands in the community because I'm that man. One of the things I believe is my job is to secure all of them. All of them. So I'm using the word secure as my presentation. My invitation for us all is to take that word and realign a new social contract around what it is we do around advocacy as it relates to these children and these mothers, and bring down the maternal mortality in our community. So the S has been talked about several times. Support. To find a language of support. Some people are getting their language of support through social media or reality TV. And they think the way you support things is go off all the time. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go off on a doctor. You don't know what you're talking about. That becomes adversary. We don't need to create that in the whole environment. Remember, the baby is hearing all the things we're talking about. The baby is absorbing all that language, all that drama, all that energy. And we can talk about what happens with brain development of children from 0 to 2 years old and the impacts that has on the whole trajectory of life. But we won't go all the way there. But I believe I'll just plant that seed. That support doesn't always look like what we've defined it as. I love the fact that you said swallow. Because what men sometimes tend to do is they believe, oh, that's the woman's world. And we push that off. But we need to swaddle the baby while the baby's in utero, but we also need to swaddle the woman. Mm-hmm. What kind of world can we bring around her that supports her? One particular thing that I need to make sure is we check our language with her. We not put things into her world. Instead, we try to take things out. Take away the other S, stress. Her body, as you just laid out, is getting stressed all the way around the block. So we need to remove stress. We need to remove strife, whether we're creating it or somebody else is. So like Dr. Ruth does, she kind of stands up the world and says, y'all get out of here. Or like you just said, what a father can do is he can be defender and protector. Mm-hmm. It's a brand new world, brand new responsibilities, but I'm going to be meaningfully involved in providing meaningful support. The support is just isn't, go girl, good luck. That's not it. It's got to be meaningful. And the way it's got to be meaningful, can't be just meaningful to me as the husband, man, whatever. It's got to be meaningful to her. So the question we have to do if I'm going to properly support her is to ask, what can I do to support you? Mm-hmm. Sometimes the sister doesn't always know, but the question is an opportunity. It's an invitation to explore and learn. I would say the E, insecure, is not just encourage, but to explore. What you just did in your presentation gave a whole bunch of brothers out here, I didn't know the body did that. Or a lot of brothers don't know what happens during childbirth. I kind of watched it and I was like, oh no, whoa, I can't, wow. That's going on, he's going through a whole lot. I didn't get it, but mom gave me all kind of books, told me read this, read that, check this out. But I think brothers need to go ahead and explore. Explore what she's going through. Explore the doctor. What's your C-section rate? I asked about the C-section rate before the baby was on, the baby was on the way, but I asked, what's your C-section rate? How many babies do you deliver that are by C-section? What does that look like? Have you dealt with high-risk pregnancies? And it's not checking as an adversary, it's asking. But brothers need to be freed up to explore. And like you just invited, Pastor, if you don't know, ask somebody. We know the cliche. But if you don't know, ask somebody. There's so many resources out here. We need to encourage our fathers in our community to begin to explore. The moment you start exploring, you become into the new world of advocacy because you become more informed. And I want to also encourage brothers not to make this about you. See, all of a sudden you become the expert. That's not what that E stands for. You're not suddenly the expert. Right? I remember when my first child was on the way, I went to the library, found this book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. And I'm thinking I was young at the time, and I was sitting there thinking, oh, I know all this, but I read a little bit more of that book and I realized what I didn't know. But if you start exploring, asking, you become the language of not experts, but the language of a supportive advocate. Because advocates don't make it about them. And it's important that we check that. Because we make it about me, then all of a sudden I'm trying to become the subject of the story. And now I have to prove I'm more right than the doctor. And guess who we're arguing? I'm arguing with a doctor, and she's pregnant. And there's a baby in there hearing all this. And I'm so concerned about being right that I'm not concerned about being real and respectful, which takes us to the R. I'm glad we have a room full of things talking about respect and responsibility. Sometimes what I've heard in our community, just being real with each other, right, is we hand that responsibility off to the woman. Oh, you're pregnant. All right, well, we think our world gets reduced to child support. Our role gets reduced to child support. 30-some years ago, I was in the space of mentoring young people. And young people were talking about how good they were. And they were talking about, oh, that's great. Let's go ahead and talk about that. What does it look like to be a man? And the young man said, a man is strong and he pays his child support. 30 years ago. What's the social contract that young person is dealing with, coming up thinking that that's the role of the man, to pay child support? So we have to do several things in the space of being advocates within our community. We need to respect the fact that we don't know it all, and there's things going on in this woman's body that we're not hip to. We have to be able to be responsive and hold other people accountable to being responsive. So when the sister says, I'm in pain, make sure what's going on with her pain. Can we explore what we need to do? Something's changing here. I'm not adversarial, but I'm asking because I'm still in the space of exploring. I'm still supportive. I'm still exploring. And now I'm being responsive. Right? I flipped a little bit ahead with the R. I meant to go straight to not only explore, but deal with the C. Curious. Be curious. That exploration and that curiousness comes into kind of hand in hand, but it gets you into the point now just being not only exploring what's happening with her body, but being curious about what's next. All right, sometimes we leave it there, we learn there, we stop. But we have to not just be curious, but now also be courageous. Like Pastor was saying, men get scared. I don't know what to do. Advocates doesn't mean that you know everything, but you get curious and then courageous enough to ask. If you don't know, what do we say? Better ask somebody. But you got to be curious and then courageous. We've got to inspire that throughout our other city, throughout our community. We have to change our language around childbirth, child rearing, all of that, so our social contract comes in line in a way that actually gets the entire community, like the Latino community, bringing a bubble of support around the entire family unit, no matter how it looks. No matter how it looks. So that's where those C's kind of break down. All right, and that C does not mean that we now focus on custody. That's not the C we're talking about. All right, so, or conflict. So there's some C's we got to take out, there's some C's we got to take in. The U in that whole word speaks about not only being unwavering, but identify ways of unifying. I may not get along with the mother, but that's not the point anymore. We still have to find a way, a space to unify around the baby. Our community needs to unify around a family. We've got to buy into that concept of unity, and advocates do the same thing. It's not me, lady, child against. It's creating a partnership with the doctor and the health systems. We now have to become unified in our goals. So if my goal or your goal as a doctor, if your goal is to make sure we have a healthy birth, healthy child, successful maternal experience, then I'm your partner. And we become unified at that point, we become better advocates. We have to help our community step out of this reality TV world and conflict world and identify that principle of unity and make sure it's around everything. That may adjust so that when we start hearing the chirping in the different ears, are you unified with me? Are we together? Or are you just gossiping with something? At that point, I can kind of like put some checks and balances. Not everybody's going to have a Dr. Ruth, right? But everybody's going to have a father somewhere in the space, whether it's the actual father or the other man in the space. All right? So that's the S, E, C, and the U. I meant unwavering because I want to stress that and bring that right back. Because sometimes in the space of I don't knows, men and others back away. I don't know. All right? But the thing that we're real clear on is advocate doesn't mean no. Advocate does not mean you know everything. Advocate means that you are the one who's stepping and leaning in and not moved because of the fear. That courageous connects to that unwavering. All right? It's not separate in that word. It's connected to the unwavering. I've got to be unwavering, particularly in my focus around what's best. All right? So the R I kind of came back to, right, in that word. Responsible, respectful. Well, advocates sometimes also need to make sure is they need to be realistic. And what I mean in that concept of realistic is we can't always expect the perfect pregnancy. Perfect pregnancy is the one that ends with the child being healthy and the mother being healthy. All right, but realistic also keeps me very clear. There's challenges I'm realistically dealing with. And I'm getting in that partnership that we have. I'm unified with you, right, Chief? I'm asking questions that kind of get me real clear about what's next. Sometimes I've seen it in my own experience with my own children. I was not prepared for some of the challenging experiences because I'm a two-time near miss is what we call it. So during the childbirth of two of my children, I almost lost a mother. I say I almost lost a mother. Yes, we almost lost a mother. Preeclampsia, when you said that, I was like, I know all about that because I saw it. My job as an advocate was not to add more pressure. Seeing her climb stairs, I had fun with that because I'd be able to come behind and push. But there was a reason why I enjoyed some of that, right? I made a game out of it. But the idea, I know I'm telling too much of my story, but that's why I have 3 kids, right? But the idea, though, is not to judge, but identify ways of support. All right, and I need to unify with the doctor and be realistic. I can't expect her to be able to do everything she was doing before. Now, she's 17 months pregnant, and I'm still saying, hey, I'm tired. I can't cook dinner tonight. What do you want? I need, you know what I mean? So we need to be realistic with how and what we're dealing with in terms of what she's dealing with. All right, so in the last E, I always want to encourage fathers, others. So I'm not just talking about fathers, I'm talking about community. We need to be empowered. And empowered doesn't mean that you have a capacity to turn on and off a light switch. You can't just give empowerment. I'm going to empower you to do something. No, empowerment means that you have the capacity to define and act on interests. It's not just I'm gonna give you a piece of paper with a mission statement and now you're empowered. Because if you haven't done that other work, define and then act on your interests, all I did was give you a piece of paper. Even with when we give that education, if that education doesn't turn into connecting with my interests and the actions associated with that interest, nothing else happens. It's just good information. So we need to figure out how to truly activate this empowered context around an advocate. Advocates say, what are the interests? And they better keep it very clear. Interests are mother, baby, healthy. Not who has custody, where's the money, what's the bill, even though those are real variables. But an advocate, if we're doing it as a community, truly focused on all those things, is keeping the interest in mind, identifying and defining them, and then moving forward and acting on them. Now, sometimes actions require other resources. So we have to, again, identify and ask. If we don't know, ask somebody. All right, so I'm going to end with this last piece. The other E was encouragement. But I want to make sure I put a cautionary note for fathers so they don't do what I did. One of the things I was trying to do, because I was I'm literally one of the finest fathers on the planet. I'm already the finest black man on the planet, but I thought I was the finest father on the planet. And I'm going to be I'm the super coach. I went to all the birthing classes. I knew all the language. I had all the swagger. I knew exactly how long it took to get out of the bed, pick up the bag, and drive to the hospital. Right? I knew how to do all that. I knew I had it all together. So here I am taking that last E thinking it's empowerment. No, I was thinking encourage, be a coach, be in there. Yeah, come on. So she's going through and I'm doing it with her. Yes, and I was such a good coach. I was really, really good. Until I lost my mind a little bit, and after this last contraction hit, and I thought, whoa, that was a good one, right? Because you can see the monitor right beforehand. That contraction's coming, you're like, oh, this is a big one. I said, better you than me. Oh. To which everybody in the room said, what? And I'm thinking, because really I was trying to say, I couldn't do that. Yeah. It didn't come out that way. So what I encourage fathers to do this last E is get your script right and identify the best way to encourage. And sometimes, like you said, sometimes the encouragement is where you step back and you're cerebral and watching. Being present, being engaged, but not necessarily putting yourself in the mix. As a community, we need to be able to do the exact same thing. We need to figure out ways to encourage and not just do it in a way that just encourages the mother, but encourages the rest of the family unit around. And that includes the doctors, that includes the doulas, that includes Sister Chicky on the side. Not the side chick, Sister Chicky on the side. You hear what I'm talking about? It includes a whole network of people that we bring around and into the conversation of just the social contract. So that when we are in the business as a community of advocacy, and we're building a community culture of advocacy, we are adjusting the social contract that creates an environment that mothers, when mothers and fathers, when we experience pregnancy as a community. And we do things in the space of that advocacy that brings about the kind of community, the kind of community outcome that we want, which is fewer mothers dying in childbirth, fewer children dying in childbirth, and fewer community impacts, negative impacts that result from us not engaging in a way that's constructive from 0 to at least 5 years old. We say 0 to 1 year, but I'm expanding some of that because I actually believe that the mortality, that rate that we're seeing in our community, not just among infants and mothers, but the rest of the mortality rate is directly connected to what we do with these families 0 to 5. Brain development, social engagement, cultural enrichment, all the other social determinants that impact our community are settled in how we as a community advocate for these families, 0 to 5 years old. All right, so I talked your ears off. I don't see any questions, which actually means I probably did a good job. All right, I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you for the blessing of being here.
I could take credit. I could. Thank you for that, Toby Miller.
Thank you.
Combining and joining all of the components of our speakers. Eva, the tall one.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming out. I think hopefully everybody, this is hopefully it was informative. I think I really enjoyed the conversation. I think, one of the biggest things I think when we can look at, with Serena Williams having issues, Dr. Susan Moore, that's the doctor who passed here, is and as Toby was talking about, just advocacy, speaking up for yourself. I can just say as myself, as a doctor, just being on that, the patient-doctor relationship and having those conversations with patients, and you get the ones who ask you the tough questions and the challenging, and sometimes you don't have the answer, say, hey, I'm going to have to get back with you. And I know, I have heard from patients and seen research about this, about advocacy, and sometimes patients feel they can't question us as doctors. And what I would just really want to encourage people, because I really think, especially when we're dealing with this, with maternal mortality, these symptoms and things that's happening and not being heard, is ask those questions. And I can comment for myself, can't say for Dr. Sanders, but I would say if you got a doctor and you ask them a question, they're getting mad at you, you probably need to find a new doctor.
You're right.
I would just put that out.
Absolutely right.
That's just me. And they can be tough. Your patient can ask you some questions and they're rightfully so, because I think it's like anything, for anything in this world, especially dealing with humans, it's about relationships. And that's the only way you're gonna build relationships is talking and working through things. So I'm glad all of you stuck around and came out. If I could just encourage you, see, we got a pretty, this is just the first part of the segment. We got the second part next Saturday, still here, same time. We're gonna get to meet Dr. Ruth, and everybody saw her references. She's supposed to be here. She's gonna talk about what's coming after the baby arrives. And then we have a great panel. I know the bishop was here. He'll be serving on the panel where we're going to talk with some men in the community, fathers, and talk about their fatherhood journey as being fathers, secondary fathers, uncles, grandfathers. So it's going to be a good event. So please promote this. Tell people about it. Tell them to come on out. I know there's something else going on, so maybe that was a little bit of a conflict. But I'm glad we were able to get the recording. That's going to, I think, serve so we can share this message, because I think as everyone can probably echo, this is an important issue. We saw the numbers that Dr. Sanders showed, so there's something we need to do, and we can all do something. Yeah. We can all do something to try to do our little bit. So promote. Go in church tomorrow. Tell it in your church congregation. Spread the word. Let folks know that this is happening. That if you haven't gotten the flyer, please see me. I can email you the flyer so you can put it in the church bulletin and tell people and spread it in the community so people can come out to our next session. It's going to be a good one. And I want to say thanks to Dr. Miller, for bringing me into this and trying to spread this message, because I would applaud her heart and her genuine interest and trying to help our community and help people overall. And I think this is very important. And I think I'm looking forward to next week and even more, because we need to get that number down. I think even one mother dying in this country is one too many. And we need to continue to try to figure out how to solve it.